Welcome to Career Uprising. I'm your host, Lorraine, a career and executive coach dedicated to helping clients who are 40 plus to break free from feeling stuck and transform into the unstoppable force you're destined to become. I'm a former recruiter and two-time career changer, and I know what it takes to get hired. If you're in a job search, stuck in a toxic job, or simply hungry for what's next in your career, this show will provide you with a unique blend of practical strategies and big picture insights to guide you every step of the way. Let's start the uprising. Hey everyone, welcome to the show. This is episode 166, Navigating Workplace Cultures with RedBalloon CEO Andrew Crapuchettes. Welcome to the show, everyone, and I am so excited for my guest today. I'm going to tell you more about him in just a minute, but first, I want to make my usual plea to please follow this show on Apple Podcasts. Go ahead and hit that subscribe or follow button. It helps the show. It is the best thing you can do. Also, leaving a review. I very much read and appreciate every single review, and I'm so thrilled. This show has been running since 2018, and we're getting up there in our episodes. So welcome today. I want to dive right in because we have a phenomenal conversation to have today. And I know it's a cliche. I say that a lot, that I always love my show and my guests, and I do. I would never bring you a show that I didn't think was amazing, but I really mean it. This time, when I say I am excited for this conversation. If you do not yet know my new friend, Andrew, let me introduce you to him because he is going to talk about such a meaty topic that so many of my clients are hungry for help with, and that is workplace cultures. All right. So Andrew is a seasoned business leader. He's an entrepreneur. He is an innovator in the technology industry who actually started in Silicon Valley in the late 90s, of all places. He has gone on to become founder and CEO of a number of companies, I think, and has made a lot of contributions specifically within the labor market and the employment industry, which is why I think he's such a phenomenal guest for us to have. And he's a connection that I made a couple of years ago, and I've been kind of following his work and fascinated by it. So it's a bit of a full circle moment to have him here today. But most recently, in 2021, he founded RedBalloon, which has emerged as America's leading platform for connecting employers and employees who prioritize positive workplace culture, something that we need more of in corporate America. Under his leadership, the company has grown rapidly over the last 4 years and has really become a significant player in the employment marketplace. Andrew is a regular speaker. He has been on quite a few platforms that you are going to recognize. He's been featured in Business Insider, USA Today, Newsweek, and many more. And I'm not even kidding you. I scrolled across an article the other day and I just happened to see him and I was like, oh, there's my friend Andrew. He's popping up in the news everywhere. It's true. So I'm really, really thrilled that he is on Career Uprising today. And just in case you guys haven't noticed, it's been a real shit show in the corporate world. The last couple years in particular have been pretty rough between the COVID craziness, the return to office battle, the AI, taking over. There have just been seismic shifts in the working world. It's a lot to deal with, you guys, and navigating all of the changes that are happening in corporate America right now is really, really tough. And I think he's a great person. I cannot wait for him to share his perspective today. So why don't we just get right to it? Welcome to the show, Andrew.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here, and I agree with you. The navigating your career, particularly someone who's further along in their career, is tricky. So I'm excited to be in this conversation.
Yes, absolutely. I think you're gonna have a really unique perspective on what's going on right now. First, let's take a step back and just can you tell our listeners a little bit more about your background? Where did you
Sure.
come from and how did you get into the work you're in today?
Yep, totally. Okay, so yeah, I grew up in San Francisco Bay Area. I did the .com thing. I actually started working when I was 16. Never got around to going to college because when you're a young person who knows how to program in the San Francisco Bay Area in the heart of the .com era, going to college felt like a waste of time. So ended up doing a ton of different things for a business in the Bay Area, and just kind of watched what huge amounts of VC money were doing. I got to travel the world with them. I got to turn 21 on an expense account and kind of see the corporate world front and center. And then I moved to Idaho because at the ripe old age of 22, I was burned out. I've been working 80-plus hour weeks for a long time. I had the stock options that would have made me a multimillionaire as a 20-year-old that then turned into nothing. So I didn't have anything and thought, I just need a change of pace. I don't have a life. I'm going to move up to Idaho. So I did. I worked for the company for about a year while I moved up here. So I was an early adopter in kind of remote work and leaving California, honestly. And but then they went out of business. The $32 million of VC money that we had raised ran out. There were a lot of interesting decisions that I saw made. I wasn't on the executive team, so I didn't get to make those decisions, but I got to see them firsthand and what they look like. And then I was like, okay, well, I'm a Bay Area hotshot. I'm going to go ahead and find myself a new job here in Idaho. And it turns out it wasn't actually as simple as that. There were not a lot of high tech jobs in Little Moscow, Idaho. We're a university town, so you have the university, the hospital, and Walmart were kind of the major employers, and none of them wanted to hire a Bay Area computer programmer and sales engineer. So, okay, what am I going to do? So I decided, well, I've been given skills. I should create some jobs because if I want a job, I bet other people do too. So I kind of went on this tirade of starting businesses. I started a 3D printing business that we ended up selling off to Stryker Engineering. I started a student information software business with some other guys, and we ended up doing a management buyout with that. So I sold the business to the employees. I wanted them to be able to build wealth. And then I started a labor market data company. And this really the goal here was how do you make labor market data actionable? How do you give decision ready information at the point of decision for as many individuals across the planet as possible? Because there's a lot of information on where you should go to dinner tonight or where you could go to dinner tonight, where you're going to go on a vacation. Can you get a mortgage for your house on your cell phone? But if you wanted to find out what is the skill that I need as a Java developer that's going to give me the highest bump in earning potential, should I learn SQL or Hadoop? Well, the reality is there's not really information on that. And as you're entering college, there's really not information on how do I align my interests, my desires for learning with the labor market 4 years from now when I'm probably going to graduate. Should I go into nursing? Should I go into data science? Should I go into, should I get a degree in psychology? What is that going to have? What impact is that going to have on my long-term earning potential and kind of my career perspective? So we wanted to create labor market data that really allowed people to make better decisions on some of the most important decisions in their life. Because you think about it, when you meet someone new, you ask them, "What do you do?" And you're really asking them what their job is. But that question betrays the job is more than just a 9 to 5 hobby. It's your vocation. It's a defining feature of your life. And so I've always just had this passion around how do we help people find the right job that's going to be both fulfilling and allow them to earn the money necessary to take care of their family. So anyway, raced that company forward. We built it to about a $50 million tech business, ended up selling it 4 different times, which is maybe a story for another episode. But and through the process, really spent a lot of time thinking about how do you build a strong culture that is high performing and just full of joy, a culture that everybody enjoys working here, feels safe. There's no backstabbing, there's no gossip, and is again high performing. And when I ended up leaving the business in 2021, we were growing 25% a year with a 40% margin, almost zero turnover. We just had a wonderful business. But then my board decided that I wasn't the right fit for the business because I'd sold it. I didn't have enough ownership to push back. And so I ended up leaving the business. But it really was a fun adventure building the data to help people make better career decisions and then building jobs. So we had about 250 employees when I left, building jobs where people could have meaningful careers. They could take care of their families. They could really enjoy work. And I feel like in America, we've kind of lost this joy of a hard-working day. And I wanted to get back to that. So there you go. There's a quick roundup on my story. I'm super with it.
Yes, no, thank you for that. Wow, you've had a storied career, and you're right. We probably could do a whole nother show diving deeper into some of the things that you have experienced. But one thing that you said that I really appreciate is that you're really open about the lack of a college degree in there. And that is something that a lot of my listeners can relate to. It's something that people worry about. How am I gonna how is that going to be perceived? And I love hearing stories of people who've made thriving careers in kind of a non-traditional way where they don't always follow the exact path of, you go to college and you get a 9 to 5. I feel like you've had a lot of other paths in there, including entrepreneurship and just really, took a bit of a non-traditional path. And I can appreciate that a lot. So, what I would love to know from your perspective, you've been in Silicon Valley, you've been a business owner, you've also worked for other people. I mean, you've grown a number of companies here. What is going on in the changing landscape here of workplace culture? What are the issues right now that both employers are dealing with, job seekers? What trends are you been seeing in the corporate world and in company cultures?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple things I'm going to point at, and I hope I don't offend people with any of these. But what happened is, I would say over the last, I'll say 20 years, you see this shift where it used to be that employees were very loyal to their employer, and the employers would return that favor and actually be loyal to them. They would figure out a way to help them retire from the business. They would help take care of their families. They actually cared about their employees in a very different way. And you kind of saw this shift, and there's a lot of different names for it, but you saw this shift where all of a sudden employers kind of started to see employees as cogs in the wheel. And actually, if you look back at the Occupy Wall Street movement, where all of a sudden you had all these people who were basically saying big banks are bad, my company is bad, and you started to see this kind of animosity and this combative relationship between employees and employers, where all of a sudden, and that's when you saw this rise of lawsuits, workplace lawsuits, where employees were starting to bring lawsuits. Some of them were real lawsuits and should have been brought, and a lot of them were not. Workplace lawsuits were on the rise. And so all of a sudden, you had this HR class that started to emerge in a business where they had an enormous amount of authority in the business without a lot of responsibility. So they could tell people what they could do and where they could go, whether the sales manager could hire someone, or whether they would need to hire someone with a different race or gender or ethnicity or sexuality. They started to have just a lot of control over the workplace environment without responsibility. And anytime someone has a lot of authority without a lot of responsibility. So they don't have to eat their own cooking. They don't have to deal with the consequences of their own actions. You start to get these weird perverse incentives and perverse behaviors that happen in the workplace. So really, you track it back to '08 when you started to see that Occupy Wall Street movement, where all of a sudden you see this shift where employers and employees are not on the same team. They're not trying to work together. They're in this combative relationship where the only incentive that the employer has is to pay you. They're not trying to accomplish something together. You fast forward to kind of the early 20 teens and into the late 20 teens. You started to see businesses starting to hire young people, and the young people are saying, look, I want to work for a business where I actually care about what the business does. I'm not just a cog in the wheel. I want to care about the mission. Unfortunately, a lot of these young people were coming out of left-leaning universities where they've been taught a certain worldview, and they were then wanted to bring that worldview to the business. And a lot of them were anti-capitalists. They were focusing on how do we push an ideology rather than pushing profitable business. And so that also created this weird shift. And a lot of them ended up in HR departments or in controlling positions in the business. Well, those dynamics have made the workplace a little more toxic than we would like it to be. Gallup recently did a poll that 67% of Americans are disengaged or actively disengaged at work. 60, so 2/3 of all Americans just are at work to get a paycheck and then leave as quickly as possible. They're just trying to race their way to retirement and then call it good. Well, that's not, I think, what is creates a fulfilling career where look at I have moved the ball forward. I've blessed my community. I've blessed my fellow coworkers. I've blessed my business, and I am supporting my family while doing all these things. And so that I think has been those are kind of the big milestones that have created this weird dynamic in the workplace where many people just don't enjoy work, and employers at this point nearly don't feel that loyalty to their employees. And whenever I had employees, and obviously I've got employees now at RedBalloon again, I feel this deep loyalty to them because a business is built on the people and the talent inside that business and what those people are accomplishing and where they're pushing. And anytime a business thinks that, look, my janitor is not that important, so I don't, need to care about that person, is kind of the beginning of the end because the success of a business is the sum total of all of the output of all of the workers. And if you can understand that and not just give lip service to my people are my most important asset, then you're going to see a culture where you have high performers who are willing to stay late, not because their boss told them to, but because they want to solve the problem for the customer. And so that's the workplace that we're in today. And so if you're a worker, you need to be trying to find an employer who actually cares about you, who actually has a mission you're engaged in, you're excited about, and you're not just kind of along for the ride trying to get a paycheck. Sometimes you need to support your family. That's just the way it is. But if you can find a fulfilling career, you have no idea what an impact it makes, not only on you, but on your family, and your kids are watching you and your community's watching, that you're willing to go and maybe take a risk, but go join a business that is doing something that you actually deeply care about. And if you can do that, it will leave a lasting legacy for your career, not just a paycheck. And I think those are the kind of dynamics that we've seen in the workforce, and kind of the only antidote that I see is people willing to stand up and say, "Look, I want to do something great that will be meaningful for my family, for my community, for my legacy, and even if I'm not earning top dollars, that's where I want to be today." So, anyway, sorry, that was a bit of a ramble, but those are the things that I've seen in the workplace.
Yeah, what I hear you advocating for is what something that we need desperately, which is a much more human-centered approach to working, right?
Yeah.
Bringing the humanity back to a lot of this because it's been eroded, and I think there's a lot of things contributing to that, and I think that, if I'm understanding correctly from our conversations, you believe there's responsibility on both sides, the employer and the employee, which is really important because I don't think it's about just the blame game of, "Oh, it's all the employer's fault," or "It's all the employee's fault because 'cause they're lazy and they're slackers," whatever. It's just I think we have to come together and we both have to be clear on our values and our mission and make sure they are aligned, and that's a lot easier said than done. It really is. I would love to know from your perspective, for a lot of people who are listening to this show, I guarantee you they're in a toxic job. They're unhappy. They are misaligned in values with their employer. They are not in an employer, statistically speaking, chances are, that is really human centered. Some of them more are. What advice would you give for them? How can they begin this process of finding an employer that is more aligned with their values?
Yeah, that's a great question. And honestly, my first piece of advice, and I actually gave this to a job seeker recently, is you need to start by living out your values at work, even if you don't have a backup plan and a new job in place. So don't do the quiet quitting, which is where people, basically just go through the motions, but their heart's not in it. They're not showing up. They're not really putting in the effort. Put in the effort, be the hardest worker in the business, but then push back against some of the silly things that are out there. And so I'm going to give you one example of how you can push back in your workplace to build a more healthy work environment. And even if you're not the boss, there's something you can do here, and that is having a zero tolerance for gossip in your workplace. So, if someone comes to you and says, "Hey, I think you're doing a bad job," you should not get defensive. You should say, "Man, thank you so much for having the courage, the guts to tell me I'm doing a bad job. I'd love your input on how do I get better." That will blow people's minds if you actually are open to input because look, we all have blind spots and we should be open to that. So whether you're a manager or not a manager, whether you're CEO or not a CEO, just be open to input from anybody, and don't get defensive. And that will really change their mind. And then you'll find that all of a sudden you're more of a leadership position. People feel more comfortable talking to you. And then when they come and talk to you and say, "Hey, have you noticed how so and so is doing a bad job?" Your first response should be like, "Wow, that's interesting. Have you talked to them yet? Have you gone and had that conversation face to face with them?" And generally that's going to get a little bit awkward, so prepare yourself, strap in for that. But live that out. Like, "Oh, well, why don't we go get that person? Why don't the three of us have that conversation right now?" Well, tell you what, people will stop talking behind each other's back when that starts happening, and you'll notice that it'll happen very, very quickly in a workplace. And when you do that, you'll notice the toxicity in a workplace goes away in a hot minute when people are not given permission to basically talk behind each other's back and gossip. And I know that sounds very simple, but even if you're not in leadership, I've seen it work at many different companies. Live that value out loud. It's going to be super awkward up front, but you're going to be a leader in your business when you do that. So start doing things like that. And then what's going to happen is either you are going to be a leader in your business and the workplace is going to get better, or you're going to get kicked out. And that's where you need to. And the reality is, there's a good chance that you are going to be removed because people don't actually want to get better. They don't want a better place. They just like the tasty morsel of being able to say something nasty behind somebody else's back. So, what you need to do is prepare now, just in case you are kicked out, in case you lose your job, because you don't want to put your family in a bad position where you can't pay your bills, right? And so you need to start looking for businesses that actually align with your values. Obviously, RedBalloon.org, the company I run now, has a lot of conservative businesses who are focused on meritocracy, who are focused on hard work, who are focused on how do we build a great workplace culture. And so if that's what you want, you should start talking to some of those employers today. You can join their talent network. You can just start having that conversation today. But my encouragement is don't just quit your job and walk away. Care for the people who are there. Stand up, live your values out loud. Try and kill gossip in the workplace. It might cost you your job, just full disclosure. But if it does, just think of the legacy that you've left for your family, that you left in the right way. You didn't just kind of walk away quietly, but you said, "No, I'm going to try and make this place better on my way out."
Mm. I love that phrase, live your values out loud. And it does always start with personal responsibility. We cannot
That's right.
expect a company to live their values if we don't live our own, even when it's tough. And it is really tough. And I love also what you shared about sometimes not giving people what they expect, right? They expect you to give into that gossip. And when you don't receive it the way they're anticipating, you've retrained them of how to talk and treat you, and you've really demonstrated your values there that you're not going to cooperate with that, and so they'll stop doing that around you. We have to train people, absolutely. So there's a lot of personal responsibility in there. I love that example that you shared. So, the other thing you touched on, I do want to hear a little bit more about Red Balloon specifically too as a job board because a lot of our job seekers are out there applying online in the black hole of all these job boards, and it's very disillusioning, and you don't really know where you're applying to. It's just very blind, right? And not enough people do research on companies that they want to work for. So tell me a little bit more about Red Balloon in terms of the job board. How do you differentiate yourself? Because I know you work a little bit differently than other ones.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I sympathize for people looking for a job because the reality is, let's say you're a sales rep and you're selling a widget. If someone says no, they're saying no to that widget and you can kind of move on. But if you're applying to jobs, you're selling yourself. And if they say no, thank you, or they ghost you, which is often unfortunately the case, they're basically saying no to you, which makes it extremely personal, right? So what Red Balloon does is we ask our employers to sign a pledge. Are you going to respect the freedom of your employees and your future employees? And are you going to allow them to come do their best work, provide great value, and then go home and support their families? And so we have, and many of those employers, in fact, almost all of those employers are right-leaning conservative businesses who want to focus on merit. They want to focus on allowing employees to live their values out loud and being loyal to their employees. And so that's the moment that we're in America, where unfortunately you do need be a little more picky about the types of businesses that you are applying to, trying to work at, because not all businesses are the same. And so Red Balloon is a place where you can go to find businesses who are focused on what made America great in the first place, which is hard work, meritocracy, and not kind of the DEI woke ideology that's been infecting the traditional American workforce today.
So tell me, as we just wrap up, a little bit more about where people can go to follow you or learn more about your organization. Where's the best place to connect?
Yeah, so you can go to redballoon.work. It's not .com, redballoon.work. We are the nation's leading pro-freedom job board. We also provide, we have some great resources, like we have an employee bill of rights and responsibilities. That's a free download that you're welcome to go in. You can create a profile at redballoon.work. If you don't want to apply to jobs, you can create a job seeker profile for free. And that will allow employers to actually find you rather than you having to apply to every job out there. And we have thousands of job seekers joining every single week. We have new employers joining every single week. There's a great opportunity to actually have fun at work again, which is really where we want to be. So redballoon.work. And the other thing I'd say is follow me on LinkedIn. I try and put out a daily post, just one a day, on how to build workplace culture, how to apply to jobs, and hopefully meaningful content that'll help you in your career.
Yes, I was just going to make a plug for that because I follow you. I'm connected with you on LinkedIn, and you do post a lot, and sometimes they're kind of humorous too. I love following your stuff on there, so I would definitely recommend that. So, thank you so much, Andrew, for coming on and sharing your background, your perspective on this. I love to have people just come with different perspectives and keep it open to new ideas. And I think that you have a really interesting background and a unique perspective, and this is a tough issue. So there's a lot more, that we could say about workplace culture, but I think that you have really presented a number of great insights, and especially the living your values out loud. I think that's really where it starts on an individual level. So thank you so much for coming, and I would encourage everyone to learn a little bit more about Andrew and what Red Balloon does. And thank you for listening to Career Uprising, and I am going to be back in another week with a new show. So thank you guys so much. Hey, it's Lorraine, and I want to say thanks for listening. If you found value in today's show, I would be honored to have your review on Apple Podcasts. It's the single best way to help this show be found by other listeners, and you'll earn some good karma. Thanks again for tuning in, and I can't wait to connect with you next time on Career Uprising.